What do you make of this decision to deploy tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus?
I think it's once again Mr. Putin raising the ante and seeing if, in fact, he can weaponize the threat to use nuclear weapons or the apparent threat to use nuclear weapons to succeed both in controlling the news media during the period they've been heavily focused on the coming, now with us, Ukrainian offensive, and take some of the sting away, perhaps, from the recovery of a number of small villages.
I mean, do you think that this is an indication that he could be prepared to use a nuclear weapon, or is all of this just more what is sometimes called saber rattling to try to show his enemies that he is undaunted?
Only Mr. Putin knows that, and he may not yet have thought it all the way through, thinking that the threat now is serving his interests, whether he actually complies with that threat and actually carries it out is a different story. The whole nature of deterrence means that in moving in that direction, he threatens, obviously, a catastrophic result on the planet, including on Russia. And that is not something that we would want people to go into lightly or accidentally, even though he speaks as if he is, in one way or another, seemingly setting aside those restraints. And that is very dangerous.
Yeah, and we've seen these warnings from an influential Kremlin advisor, Sergei Karaganov, who is chairman at the Council of Foreign and Defense Policy, saying that Russia should escalate its nuclear rhetoric to try to force Western countries to back down. And he talks about advising Russians living abroad to evacuate from areas near potential targets. I mean, it does suggest that there is a real, at least potential threat here.
I knew Sergei Karaganov when I was in Russia in the early 90s. He hasn't changed a bit. A man whose lip moves ahead of his mind. And in this particular issue, it's a hard and fast conservative Russian position that Sergei has adopted and continues to promulgate in obvious support of his godfather, Mr. Putin.
So
it's no less dangerous, even if, in fact, he himself is known as someone who toys with this kind of statement as a matter of his public policy position.
So you don't think it necessarily means that Putin really is contemplating a nuclear strike? This is just more of the sorts of threats that we've been seeing.
Sergei Karaganov does not speak for Vladimir Putin, but he finds every way he can to cozy up to him, and obviously he has decided that speaking out this way is achieving that personal objective.
Jens Stoltenberg, who of course is the head of NATO, has said that there are no signs that Moscow is preparing to actually launch nuclear weapons. So that, I guess, should be at least of some reassurance.
That's true, and it's important, but it's not certainly final and forever the proposition we have to deal with. Mr. Putin delights in threats, uses them fairly frequently, cannot, in that particular sense of the word, given his aggression against Ukraine, be trusted entirely, even if he were to say tomorrow, I will never use nuclear weapons. He's put in place now a situation where his unreliability, if I could put it this way, is being enlisted as an ally in the favor of his avarice.
In the meantime, we've got this counter-offensive by Ukrainian forces underway. The Ukrainian military claiming to have retaken 7 villages in the past week, though Russia is denying Ukraine has made any gains. I mean, it is obviously very difficult to assess exactly what is happening because of the difficulties of getting to that area. But certainly any gains that have been made by Ukraine so far appear to be pretty small, don't they?
At the moment, they do not in any way at all match the gains that were made in the August-September offensive, when the Russians began by withdrawing large numbers of troops from around Kiev and Kharkiv, and even a little bit on some of the fronts where the contest has gone on for a long period of time and been more closely fought. This is a slower offensive. The Russians have had a long time to dig in and build deep defenses. The Ukrainians have unrolled their combat power more slowly, testing as they go. It's not an unusual offensive in that sense, and because it hasn't achieved a kind of miraculous and surprising result in the first couple of days, we should not sell it short.
We've seen, though, some of those pictures, images of the scale of the Russian fortifications. It is going to be very difficult, isn't it, for Ukraine to really demonstrate that it is making progress. And there is a huge amount of pressure and expectation amongst international allies for Ukraine to do so, to make some headway now that they've provided so much in terms of military support and training and so on.
Yes, all who support Ukraine, and I'm among them, would like to see faster, more distinct, more clear-cut progress. On the other hand, we have to deal with realities as we deal with this war. And it is clear that at the moment, the Russian defensive posture is much more suited, if I could put it that way, to the current Russian psyche among their military. They have failed in a number of ways to make the kind of initial and then subsequent gains that many people thought they could when the war started, rolling up in 3 days, 3 weeks, or 3 months, all of Ukrainian forces. That's not happening. The Ukrainians have shown a very distinct commitment to defend their homeland, for which they should have the world's greatest respect. And at this time, obviously, how and in what way the next phase of the military battle will unroll will help to determine the outcome. But at the end, we should not necessarily expect it would be clear-cut, definitive, and awarded to one side exclusively. This is going to be a very difficult period. It's going to tax both Ukrainian capacity to manage offensive power and Russian capacity to manage defense. And anyone who tells you it's a slam dunk is certainly, at this point, a prisoner of his own imagination.